From the outside, Oakwood Arcadia looked like the perfect suburban retreat. Lined with tall oak trees, the neighborhood boasted rows of spacious brick houses, each with a neatly trimmed lawn, a short driveway, and a two-car garage. Sidewalks meandered between well-kept gardens, and a modest community park lay at the center, with a small pond and walking trail. At first glance, Oakwood Arcadia seemed a tranquil haven, a place where neighbors waved kindly from their porches, children played on front lawns, and the occasional barbecue aroma drifted through the summer breeze. I moved in after landing a new job in the nearby city, drawn by the promise of a peaceful environment and strong property values. The real estate agent had warned me that the Homeowners Association, HOA, was fairly strict, but that was normal for many American suburbs. I shrugged it off. How bad could it be? Typically, an HOA enforced minor rules about lawn height or holiday decorations. I was fine with that if it kept the area looking nice. Shortly after settling into my new house, I discovered that Oakwood Arcadia's HOA had a particularly vigilant presence. A middle-aged woman named Karen Arnett. In her mid-50s, Karen carried herself with the stiff posture of a drill sergeant and wore her short, styled hair like a helmet. She'd appear at seemingly random times, striding down the sidewalk in crisp pastel outfits, a clipboard clutched under her arm, scanning for any violations. For the first few weeks, I had no direct run-ins with her. I'd occasionally spot her from my window, peering at a neighbor's flower bed or taking pictures of someone's slightly overflowing trash bin. The neighbors whispered about how she'd scolded them for minor infractions. Still, no one wanted to challenge her too hard, as she claimed to speak for the entire HOA board. Since I followed typical guidelines, maintaining my lawn, not leaving bikes in the driveway, my impression was that I'd remain out of her crosshairs. That assumption would soon prove naive. My only potential violation was that I'd installed standard insect screens on my windows, a common practice to keep bugs out during warm seasons. The original house design lacked them, but I had them added soon after moving in, simply to enjoy fresh air without letting in mosquitoes or flies. Little did I realize that Karen had strong opinions about how these screens ruined the uniform look of Oakwood Arcadia's facades. I was about to face a bizarre decree from Karen, demanding the removal of all insect screens in the neighborhood. And in a twist that would reveal her hypocritical nature, she secretly installed a Deluxe screen in her own window, hoping no one would notice. Once I discovered this double standard, it sparked a battle that would embarrass Karen and preserve my right to keep bugs at bay. One late spring morning, I walked to my mailbox and found a crisp, HOA-branded letter. The heading read, "Notice, Window Facade and Insect Screen Policy Update." Intrigued, I scanned the text. Dear residents, to maintain Oakwood Arcadia's consistent architectural appearance, the HOA board has voted to prohibit the use of external insect screens on street-facing windows. These screens disrupt the uniform design and detract from our community's visual standards. Therefore, all screens must be removed no later than June 15th. Failure to comply may result in fines. If you have concerns about insects, consider alternative methods, such as interior retractable screens or keeping windows closed. This measure ensures a cohesive exterior look for all. Thank you for your cooperation. Karen Arnett. On behalf of the Oakwood Arcadia HOA, I reread it in disbelief. Prohibit external insect screens? Are they serious? Many houses in suburban America used standard screens. The letter stated these disrupt the uniform design. But from where I stood, an insect screen was a normal part of a window. They were typically subtle, thin frames, fine mesh, that hardly made a property look unkempt. This new rule seemed petty and intrusive, especially the note about keeping windows closed. Did the HOA expect us to never enjoy fresh air on mild days? Walking inside, I noticed how many of my neighbors also had standard screens. Some houses, especially those with kids, kept windows partially open in warm weather for ventilation. Why on earth would the HOA claim screens were unacceptable? Searching online, I found no mention of such a rule in Oakwood Arcadia's original bylaws. Possibly it was a new measure spearheaded by Karen, who who disliked visible screens. The letter didn't even mention a board vote date or any prior discussion. Within hours, the neighborhood chat group exploded. Dozens of residents complained that removing screens would let in mosquitoes, particularly near the neighborhood's pond. Others questioned how they'd manage without screens in the height of summer. A few said they'd comply, albeit reluctantly, to avoid fines. Many were outraged, suspecting Karen had pushed this through without a fair hearing. The next HOA meeting was set for early June, less than 2 weeks before the compliance deadline. People demanded an explanation, but Karen was notoriously dismissive of direct challenges. I debated ignoring the notice, but the threat of fines was real. The letter indicated $50 per window fines if screens remained after June 15th. That could add up quickly. Nevertheless, I vowed to attend the upcoming HOA meeting to voice my opposition. The rule felt nonsensical. If enough residents stood up, maybe we could reverse it. I had no idea that I'd soon discover Karen's hypocrisy, that she, who insisted we remove all screens, was quietly installing an upscale screen in her own window behind the scenes. In the days following the letter, Oakwood Arcadia's atmosphere turned anxious. Neighbors asked each other if they planned to remove their screens or risk fines. Some older residents with limited incomes were particularly worried about replacing external screens with pricey interior retractable ones, as the letter suggested. Others dreaded the idea of closing all windows in summer. The entire block seethed with frustration over a decision that made no sense from a comfort or practical standpoint. One neighbor, a retiree named Evelyn, said she had a medical condition aggravated by stale air. She needed fresh airflow. "I can't imagine living with sealed windows, especially in nice weather," she lamented. "But I can't afford big fines either." Another family worried about their toddler's safety. Screens can help prevent children from leaning too far out windows. It seemed the new rule posed real hardships. Meanwhile, the letter's justification, uniform aesthetic, sounded trivial compared to these concerns. Rumors circulated that Karen alone had orchestrated the measure. The so-called board vote might have been done hush-hush, with minimal input from other board members who typically went along with her. That angered us further. I decided to rally some neighbors to attend the HOA meeting. We'd voice how screens were standard in many American neighborhoods, especially near water bodies with mosquitoes. Banning them was an overreach. If Karen insisted, we'd demand a formal membership vote. After all, large changes to the bylaws typically required broader approval. Still, there was an undercurrent of fear. Karen had a track record of pushing petty but binding rules, and the board rarely opposed her. People felt she'd interpret any defiance as violation, resulting in fines. So, many considered caving in, albeit resentfully. One breezy afternoon, I was walking my dog around the block. As I passed near the back of the neighborhood, I spotted a ladder leaning against the side of a house. A local handyman was perched near a second-story window, fiddling with something. Curiously, I recognized that house. It belonged to Karen. The area was typically tidy, so the ladder caught my attention. The handyman appeared to be installing or adjusting a screen. Could that be an internal screen? The letter said we could use internal screens, but the visible frame from outside looked robust, possibly more advanced than a simple roll-up. I paused, watching from a discreet distance. To my surprise, I overheard snatches of conversation. The handyman, "Okay, Ms. Arnett, I've got the custom fit. This screen is top-notch, nearly invisible from outside, but gives full coverage for insects." A voice from inside, likely Karen's, answered, "Excellent. I want it discreet, so it won't be obvious from the street. Make sure the edges line up perfectly behind the window frame. We can't let neighbors see it easily." My ears perked up. So Karen was installing some fancy, hidden screen system in her own window, right after issuing a directive that the rest of us remove ours? The hypocrisy was astonishing. She was going to keep bugs out of her home while forcing the rest of us to suffer or pay for expensive solutions. Then she'd hide it so no one knew she was violating the same rule she enforced. My blood boiled at the double standard. I didn't want to be confrontational on the spot, but I took out my phone and discreetly snapped a few photos from the sidewalk, capturing the ladder, the handyman, and glimpses of the partially installed screen. Just enough to prove what was happening if needed. Then I continued my walk, thoughts swirling. This was prime evidence that Karen was imposing a standard on the community that she herself wouldn't follow. If we expose this at the HOA meeting, her entire ban might crumble. Rather than rushing to confront her immediately, I decided to gather more concrete proof. The day after, I strolled by Karen's house again, discreetly checking her windows. Sure enough, in one second-floor window, I noticed a faint shimmer of mesh, though expertly recessed behind the frame. From certain angles, you couldn't tell, but if you looked closely, you'd see the screen's outline. I snapped additional photos, carefully capturing the reflection of light on the mesh. If Karen tried to deny it, I'd have photographic evidence. Next, I chatted with a neighbor named Joel who lived next door to Karen. He told me he'd seen the handyman's van earlier that week. Joel also believed he overheard Karen instructing the man to ensure the screen was invisible from the street. If we needed a witness, Joel might confirm it. That was even more telling. Karen was actively concealing her own screen usage while ordering the rest of us to remove ours. The hypocrisy was beyond blatant. From there, I compiled a small folder of evidence. 1. Photos of the ladder and the handyman installing a screen. 2. Close-up shots showing the hidden screen from outside. 3. Testimony from Joel about overhearing instructions to keep it concealed, and for a copy of Karen's official letter demanding we remove our screens. If the board was at all fair, they'd be forced to address this. Possibly it could lead to a retraction of the rule, or at least an exemption for people wanting normal screens. At best, it would publicly embarrass Karen and undermine her credibility. In the meantime, the compliance deadline loomed. Some neighbors had already taken down their screens, cursing Karen's name. I decided to keep mine up, anticipating that the upcoming HOA meeting might nullify the ban. If worst came to worst, I'd pay a fine or fight it. But I was confident exposing Karen's duplicity would sway the board or the community to push back. Before the meeting, I told a few trusted neighbors about my discovery. Their reactions ranged from shock to laughter at Karen's nerve. One neighbor, Marisol, joked, "She's basically telling us not to have screens while installing a top-tier custom one for herself. She must think we're blind." Another neighbor, Tyrone, recommended we all attend the meeting to witness Karen's reaction when confronted with the evidence. It wasn't just about petty revenge. Many people found the screen ban a genuine hardship. The climate in our area meant mosquitoes, flies, and even wasps could get into open windows. Usually, typical external screens prevented that problem. Replacing them with fancy retractable interior screens or going screenless was burdensome. So if Karen was ignoring her own rule, that might prompt a wave of protest strong enough to overturn it. Word spread in hushes that we had ammo to take Karen down a peg. Everyone planned to keep it quiet until the meeting, so she wouldn't have time to remove her hidden screen. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. Meanwhile, Karen seemed oblivious, continuing her routine of patrolling the neighborhood, presumably checking which houses had removed screens. I saw her taking notes near a house that still had them. She even stared at my windows from the street, scowling. Possibly she was preparing a list of violators to fine. She must have assumed she was untouchable. That hubris would soon backfire. On a warm June evening, 2 weeks before the official removal deadline, the community center was abuzz with an unusually large crowd. Typically, only 15 to 20 folks attended monthly HOA sessions, but that night, well over 50 residents showed up, many glaring at Karen as they took seats. The board table was set at the front. 5 members, including Karen, sat behind it. She wore a crisp pastel blazer, a polite half-smile on her face, but the tension in the room was palpable. After some minor agenda items, the president, Edgar, a mild-mannered retiree, announced, "We'll now address the new window screen policy. Many residents have expressed concerns." Karen immediately took the mic, reciting the official stance. "We enacted the ban to ensure a uniform facade. The board believes external screens degrade the aesthetic synergy of Oakwood Arcadia. We encourage alternative solutions. The compliance date is June 15th, with fines thereafter." The hush that followed crackled with anticipation. Edgar asked if anyone wished to speak. Dozens of hands shot up. He invited me first. I rose, heart pounding but determined. "Thank you, Edgar," I began. "I want to remind the board that many of us rely on insect screens for basic comfort. With mosquitoes rampant, removing them is impractical. This entire ban is extreme." Karen interjected. "We've explained that. A consistent exterior is vital. Homeowners can adapt with modern interior screens or keep windows closed if needed." I took a breath. "Right, that's your stance. But ironically, while you're forcing us to remove screens, you personally installed a new screen in your own unit, correct?" A startled murmur ran through the room. Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's false. I've complied with the same rules as everyone else." I calmly produced my folder. "Actually, I have pictures. On the afternoon of May 29th, a handyman installed a high-end, nearly invisible external screen in your upstairs window. I also have statement from a neighbor who overheard you requesting it be hidden from the street." I clicked a small projector I'd set up on a side table, displaying the first photo, the latter leaning against Karen's house, the handyman at the window, the partially visible screen frame. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. Karen's face flushed. She started stammering, "That's not. You're misinterpreting. That was a repair job on the window seal, not a screen." I switched to the next slide. A close-up of the mesh with her window partially open, the label on the frame reading EnviroShield Premium Mesh. Another wave of murmurs. This brand is known for custom insect screens. The images show the completed installation. If you look closely, you can see the mesh. Are you denying that's an external screen? Karen's composure cracked. It's a partial protective net for dust. Not a typical external screen," she flailed for words. "It's integrated behind the window's sill. Technically not visible from the curb, so it doesn't break the facade uniformity." The crowd rumbled with disbelief. Another resident shouted, "You're basically telling us not to have screens while you install a hidden one. That's hypocrisy." Karen flushed deeper, but tried to maintain a haughty posture. "I simply needed a specialized solution due to my allergies. This is medical, not aesthetic, and it's not harming the exterior look." I pressed on. "But the ban states no external insect screens, period. Your letter specifically forbids them for uniform facade reasons. If you truly believe that, you'd abide by it too. Instead, you installed a top-quality screen. The rest of us are forced to remove ours, facing fines." Edgar looked troubled, flipping through the letter Karen had distributed. "Karen, this policy makes no mention of medical exemptions or hidden screens. It's quite absolute. If you're found in violation, that's a serious matter. The HOA must enforce rules uniformly, right?" Karen opened her mouth, but Carla, another board member, seized the moment. "We can't have one rule for residents and another for you. This evidence is compelling. We can't allow double standards." The audience's tension peaked. People demanded the board rescind the ban or force Karen to remove her own screen. Some shouted that the entire measure was invalid now that Karen was caught violating it. Karen tried to retort, but her voice was drowned out by the uproar. Edgar hammered the gavel, calling for order. Once the noise settled, he turned to Karen. "For fairness, do you have any official documentation proving the board authorized you to keep an external screen while banning others?" She was silent, eyes darting, face reddening. "Then, we must treat you as a violator. The board can impose the same fine or removal requirement on you that you intended for others." A wave of approval swept the room. Another board member, Michael, said, "And if we're discovering the rules champion is not even following it, maybe we should revisit the entire ban." It was enacted quickly, without enough input. "Let's hold a board vote tonight, with the membership present, to repeal the ban entirely." Cheers erupted. Karen looked cornered. She realized she had lost. Edgar announced, "Yes, let's do that. Board members, all in favor of repealing the external screen ban, raise your hand." For hands rose. Karen kept hers down, but she was outvoted 4-1. Motion carries. The ban is rescinded immediately. No one will be fined for having standard insect screens. Ms. Arnett, you must remove or comply with the same conditions as everyone else. Karen, face drained of color, made a last feeble protest about maintaining a refined facade, but the crowd had no patience. The meeting ended in near jubilation for the residents. We'd taken down a pointless rule and exposed Karen's hypocrisy. The following day, the HOA circulated a new letter. Effective immediately, the previously announced insect screen ban is nullified. Residents may keep or install standard screens. People sighed in relief. Some who had already removed theirs began reinstalling them. A wave of defiance, or maybe just practicality. Everyone thanked me for producing the photographic evidence. They joked that it was the final nail in Karen's self-righteous coffin. Meanwhile, Karen faced a storm of ridicule behind the scenes. Neighbors whispered about how she'd invented a rule she wouldn't follow. The board privately reprimanded her for taking unilateral actions. Her hidden screen fiasco destroyed her credibility. She was compelled to remove or declare her own screen if she insisted the rule was still valid. But since the ban was repealed, ironically, she could keep her screen, only now it was no advantage or secret. She ended up removing it anyway, likely out of shame. A few days later, Joel told me he saw her house with no screens, presumably to avoid further embarrassment. Karen's status on the board waned. She remained a member, but lost the clout to push new petty regulations. The board, having realized the chaos caused by passing measures without wide input, instituted a new process requiring membership votes for major changes. Freed from trivial crackdowns, the neighborhood relaxed. People enjoyed open windows with screens, letting fresh air in, especially near the pond. The dreaded mosquito swarms never became the crisis Karen predicted. Life carried on peacefully. For me, the experience was a lesson in speaking up. If I'd stayed silent, we might all have been forced to endure a screenless summer, while Karen quietly enjoyed bug-free breezes. By exposing her double standard, the entire community regained a right to basic comfort. Plus, we discovered we didn't have to bow to every unilaterally imposed rule. Some weeks later, in midsummer, I was watering my front lawn when Karen walked by. She paused, seemingly wanted to say something. I expected another complaint, but instead, she spoke softly. I realized that the screen ban wasn't well received. Perhaps I acted too hastily. I hope we can move on. It wasn't exactly, I'm sorry, but it was close. She looked uncharacteristically uncertain, her posture less rigid. I nodded. I appreciate that. We all want a neighborhood to look nice, but we also want practical solutions. Next time, maybe we talk about it first. She gave a tight-lipped smile, then continued on. It was a fleeting interaction, but maybe a sign that even Karen realized the cost of hypocrisy. She'd lost face, but if she found a bit of humility, that was a positive outcome for Oakwood Arcadia. In the aftermath of the screen fiasco, Oakwood Arcadia found new unity. Many residents recognized the power of collective action. When the board proposed new rules, more people attended meetings, ensuring we avoided a repeat of Karen's ban. The board started issuing surveys or drafts before passing major changes, encouraging open feedback. This collaborative spirit improved the HOA's reputation and trust among neighbors. Summer rolled on with open windows across the neighborhood. At dusk, you could smell family dinners, hear faint laughter, or see flickering porch lights while enjoying gentle breezes without swarms of bugs intruding. The screens, once threatened by a petty regulation, now quietly served their purpose, as they had in countless American homes for decades. As for me, I felt vindicated. My modest action, snapping a few photos, had sparked a crucial stand for fairness. I realized how quickly an HOA official's personal bias could overshadow reason, but also how swiftly that official could be checked if the community unified. Even Karen, in her meddling ways, seemed more subdued. She no longer strolled with that same air of invincibility. Her illusions of absolute control had been pierced. Occasionally, neighbors teased me, "Hey, the screen hero," or "Thanks for saving us from the mosquito invasion." I'd laugh, replying that I just wanted to enjoy fresh air without fines. They'd grin, acknowledging the bigger principle at stake. Indeed, it was about resisting hypocrisy and arbitrary rules that put personal interest above communal well-being. The entire fiasco became a cautionary tale. If you push the community too far, they'll push back. Months later, new families moved into Oakwood Arcadia. Sometimes they heard whispered references to this screen ban saga. Veterans of the community would recount how Ms. Arnett tried banning screens, then secretly installed her own. The story became almost a comedic legend, neighbors spinning the tale at block parties or around the park benches. We had this one official, C, who didn't want any of us to have insect screens because they were ugly. Then she put one in her own window, hoping no one would notice. But we found out. The punchline would always draw chuckles, highlighting the moral that no single person is above the rules. Karen, for her part, seemed to avoid any mention of that incident. She stuck to smaller tasks, sending gentle reminders about trash, placement times, or minimal holiday lighting guidelines. The major push for controlling the entire neighborhood's facade vanished. She still had a say on the board, but rarely tried imposing grand edicts, possibly learning a lesson about overreaching. Some said that her attempt to revolve the entire community around her aesthetic preferences left a scar. Now she recognized the limit of her authority. In a way, the fiasco improved Oakwood Arcadia's sense of camaraderie. People realized that while HOAs can do good things, like maintaining shared spaces or organizing community events, they also require checks and balances. Karen's meltdown over screens reminded everyone that an HOA official is just a neighbor with a position, not an unchallengeable ruler. If residents stand together, they can preserve their rights and find a balanced approach that suits real needs, not one person's whims. As time marched on, new seasons came and went. The screens remained up in my windows, letting me enjoy the crisp autumn air or the gentle spring breezes without letting pests inside. The neighborhood carried on with typical suburban rhythms. Kids playing basketball in driveways, couples walking dogs on tree-lined sidewalks, block parties celebrating summer. The screen ban quickly faded into memory, overshadowed by other small dramas or positive developments in the neighborhood. Karen remained around, but no longer the unstoppable force that forced everyone to comply with her tastes. Some predicted she'd eventually retire from the board, seeing she'd lost the backing needed for major initiatives. Others said she might never truly retire. She thrived on feeling important. But at least her future proposals would be scrutinized. The memory of that fiasco was enough to ensure residents demanded transparency before adopting new rules. For me, living in Oakwood Arcadia felt more comfortable with each passing month. I'd greet neighbors from my open window or wave at them from across the fence. Summertime barbecues were more enjoyable with free-flowing air through screened windows. This sense of relief was a direct result of collectively challenging Karen's misguided ban. The small victory reaffirmed my belief that standing up for what's practical and fair can yield real change, even in something as seemingly trivial as window screens. Nearly a year after the fiasco, I bumped into Karen outside the community clubhouse. She was carrying a bundle of official-looking papers. We exchanged polite nods. She hesitated, then spoke. "The board is reviewing some landscaping updates. If you have ideas, you can attend the next meeting." Her tone was milder, less condescending. I offered a neutral smile. "Thanks, I might do that," I replied. "I hope we can find solutions that work for everyone." She nodded stiffly. "Yes, everyone's input matters." Then she left. It wasn't an apology, but it was a subtle admission that she needed to consider broader input. That, in itself, was progress for someone once so sure she could unilaterally decide community matters. Later, I learned that the landscaping updates involved replanting some shrubs near the pond, possibly adding bug-repellent plants. That ironically might reduce the mosquito population, further lessening the justification for screen bans. Karen's new approach seemed aimed at improving the neighborhood collaboratively, not unilaterally. Maybe she'd realized some measure of humility, or at least recognized that the community wouldn't tolerate hypocrisy again. In the end, Oakwood Arcadia continued blossoming as a tidy, comfortable neighborhood. The dreaded remove your insect screens or else directive was a mere footnote in its history, overshadowed by more constructive developments. Residents appreciated the freedom to keep their screens, preserving a sensible lifestyle that balanced aesthetics with practicality. Karen's humiliating exposure, insisting on a ban while installing her own hidden screen, became legendary gossip. But ironically, that fiasco led to a healthier dynamic. The HOA board, once rubber-stamping her commands, started acting more democratically. Residents grew bolder in voicing opinions, shaping rules that truly reflected the majority. The result was a more transparent, inclusive environment where silly bans had no place. As for me, I felt a quiet satisfaction whenever a warm breeze drifted through my open, screened window. No longer did I fret about fines or hide from some draconian rule. The relief reminded me that small acts, like snapping a photo of a ladder against Karen's house, could spark real change if we stand firm. The moral was simple. Hypocrisy crumbles under the light of truth, and collective voice can override one person's authoritarian impulses. Looking outside on a bright, sunny day, I saw neighbors mowing lawns, kids biking on the sidewalk, and yes, window screens glinting subtly in the sun. Another day in Oakwood, Arcadia, peaceful, bug-free, and no longer overshadowed by one woman's petty whim. It was, in every sense, a happy ending, thanks to a community that refused to be cowed by Karen's double standards.